webinar. My name is Earl James. I'm honored to serve as the moderator of today's session with our four highly creative and respected panelists. I serve as a board member of the Common Home of Humanity and as one of our directors, sounding boards, and advisors. And of course, before saying one more thing, we must acknowledge the great contribution that the UN 75 Forum organizers have made to finding solutions to our ongoing crisis of global governance. We're deeply indebted to them. Let me begin with a short opening statement about the content and direction of this webinar. Then I will give very brief introductions of our four panelists. There is much more biographical information on the UN 75 Forum website if you need that. As suggested by the title of this webinar, One Earth System, One Common Heritage, One Global Pact, the Common Home of Humanity has brought forth a new and transformative approach for collaborative governance of our global environment. We believe that giving legal standing to the Earth system and its safe operating space, details of which to come soon, will transform not only climate governance, but will transform the global economy into one regenerative, rather than exclusively extractive and destructive of our life-giving resources. The good news is that there is already an official UN process underway called the Global Pact for the Environment, to conclude on the 50th anniversary of the founding of UNEP in June of 2022. The bad news is that the Earth does not seem to be in sync with that timeline. In the meantime, Common Home of Humanity is building and leading an NGO coalition to influence the planned high-level declaration foreseen for the Stockholm+50 to open the door for a new systemic and interconnected approach to the climate and Earth system. So today's webinar is not just a wishful thinking chat among colleagues, but a hard look at the very narrow passage before humanity. And as extreme and threatening climate and weather events accelerate daily, a dialogue on what must be done now to survive that passage and come out the other side as a sustainable world. Finally, you are no doubt aware that as the 75th session of the UN General Assembly begins, numerous organizations are promoting great solutions to our dire climate threats. For example, the UN's own Environment Program just published its strategy for the upcoming UN Decade of Ecosystem Restoration. It is brilliant and incredibly comprehensive. Then there is the NGO and private sector event called Exponential Climate Action Summit, coming up on September 24th, designed to cut carbon emissions in half by 2030 in the race to zero. However, as with all climate solutions put forth, there is one critical element missing: a global legal framework that brings coherence and synergy to solutions and agreements, a framework that incentivizes ecosystem restoration with financial and other rewards, one that eliminates the terribly destructive practice of externalizing the cost of damaging natural resources, and one that brings balance back to the Earth system's safe operating space, upon which all life depends, all life. This safe operating space, or SOS, is what the Common Home of Humanity initiative is designed to restore and preserve. We will now hear from our panelists as they address key issues underlying our initiative, such as the urgency in redefining the global commons in an increasingly divided world, the state of the UN's Global Pact for the Environment process, how the Global Pact is also a social pact, how to avoid the trap of accepting a least common denominator pact, and strategies for organizing a global coalition of NGOs, business, and UN member states behind the Global Pact for the Environment process. Following the presentations, we will discuss key issues that have emerged before closing, with a promotion of our upcoming podcast with the Planetary Press titled Common Home Conversations. More about that then. We turn first to Maria Espinosa, who served as president of the 73rd session of the UN General Assembly, and who not only made certain that the UN resolution behind the Global Pact for the Environment process was handed off to the 74th session president, but following her tenure as UNGA president, she made a personal commitment to do all she could to move this process forward. She has also served as permanent representative of Ecuador to the UN, Minister of Foreign Affairs and Minister of Defense for Ecuador. And importantly, she has agreed, along with Dr. Isabella Teixeira, to become a global ambassador for the common home of humanity. Madam President, the floor is yours. And you have a 15-minute framework here.
Well, thank you, Earl, and thank you, Paolo, Isabella, and Magnus. It's such a privilege to be here. And in my new capacity as Global Ambassador of the Common Home of Humanity, such a privilege. It's such a privilege to be supporting this, I would say, incredible endeavor of rethinking global governance from an Earth system perspective. And it's not only environmental, it's about the way society relate to each other and the economy relate to our environment. So thank you again to the organizers, Common Home of Humanity and the UN 75 Global Governance Forum, this huge worldwide conversation to commemorate the 75th anniversary of the United Nations. The sequence of dialogues of UN 75 Global Governance Forum have been really, I think, a game changer. It has even changed the shape on the way multilateralism is built and functions. So, but what gathers us today, I think Earl, really provided a very good framework for our conversation today. And here we are speaking about a very promising process regarding the establishment of a global pact for the environment. And the title today, I think it's very compelling. One Earth System, One Heritage, One Pact, Stockholm+50 as the restore of a well-functioning Earth system and a stable climate. So we need, of course, to have this conversation that not only addresses the current scenario of anxiety, of multiple crises unleashed by the COVID-19 pandemic. And we all know that. It is not only a crisis of the environment, of our Earth system, but it is also a profound economic, financial, security, unemployment, poverty crisis. We are seeing the collapse of our social protection systems just when we needed them the most. So, but what we gather us today is to find outlets, responses to help us collectively rebuild a renewed charter, a new pact between nature, society, and the economy. That's what brings us together. And it's something that cannot be addressed in a piecemeal approach. We need a holistic cross-sectoral approach to address this umbrella that reconnects society, economy, politics, and nature. And here again, I have been listening to the conversation at the UN General Assembly this year, and it is very clear. The three top crises of our times are the climate crisis, the gender inequality crisis, because it leaves out 50% of the world's population, and the inequalities crisis. And they're all interconnect. So if we do not take action today, if we do not use the UN 75th commemoration and global dialogue, I think this current situation will increase the risk of violent conflict, create threats to human security, and challenge conflict recovery and peace building in different contexts. And that really worries us because basically, the precondition for sustainability and sustainable development is peace, and vice versa. I think that for anything to happen, and allow me to just put this element here, for anything to happen, we need to ensure meaningful women's participation, which is critical. And I'm saying this because we are also witnessing a setback on women's rights and women's spaces to participate. I won't go into the numbers, but greenhouse emissions. There's some optimists, they're saying the greenhouse emissions are lowering. You know, we know that it doesn't happen that way. CO2 gases remain in the atmosphere for about 5 years after they are released. We are seeing a little bit, because of lockdown and the slowdown of the economy, a little, decrease in the curve, but that is not sustainable if we do not take action. And Earl mentioned the numbers, the absolute need to be carbon neutral by 2050. But the way things are going and the lack of commitment and leadership from the big emitters, it's really disappointing and worrisome. But in any case, you know, this macro crisis requires macro responses. We are living extraordinary times. We need to come up with extraordinary solutions. And the starting point, I would dare to say, is that we cannot accept that our current reality cannot be changed, in that we are living a manifest destiny. I think here the Common Home of Humanity and a myriad of organizations, academic, social organizations, have taken the 75th anniversary as an opportunity to deliver a new roadmap for the future, for building back better. And this means not only debt restructuring and public investment, creation of green jobs, recovery plans, but also a strong call for a new governance to deliver for the people and the planet. And for that, we need a holistic, systemic approach. We already know a sectoral piecemeal approach simply is not going to work, especially to help us govern our global commons. And the Earth system, it's our common heritage. It is interconnected, it is interdependent. So one of the conversations that we need to have and have a political agreement upon is refresh the concept and the political responsibility over our global commons. And that, of course, poses a series of challenges. We need to redefine, in this context, the concept of sovereignty. Sovereignty, it's the will and the freedom of people to decide over their common good and their right to survival in the future. But you know, I'm not going to here go through the exercise of redefining, but that's one of the tasks ahead of us. The other key issue is not only redefining our commons, establishing clarity about how, you know, collective responsibility, multilateral responses do not counter national interest, and a rethinking of the concept of sovereignty in terms of well-being, of collective well-being and collective security. So, and the other issue is that we do have an umbrella, and the umbrella is with no doubt the Sustainable Development Goals. I think that Sustainable Development Goals can be the perfect match with a collective shared umbrella under the Global Pact for the Environment. The Global Pact for the Environment would be a delivering tool for the Sustainable Development Goal. I think that, you know, if we only look at climate action is not only one of the Sustainable Development Goals. It has enormous domino effect, enormous economic benefits, if we want to talk about economic benefits. The sustainable energy sector alone could create approximately 18 million job positions. And we are in need of job creation right now, here and now, as we speak, since millions of people have lost their jobs because of the COVID pandemic. And at the same time, the cost of not taking action here and now will cost $2 trillion per year in productivity losses. So I think that the impacts of depletion of biodiversity, of the climate crisis are huge. impacts will also be felt, for example, in the case of climate, in human health and well-being. The other day, I was going through some numbers about the amount of children who breathe polluted air, and which is currently more than 93%. And this is simply unacceptable, And we have, the possibility in our hands. We have the possibility of reducing the more than 2 million climate displaced people only in 2019. And the number is going to increase according to the science. So, to make the story short, a comprehensive systemic approach is essential to make progress both in the 2030 agenda, in the delivering of the Paris Agreement, but above all, in the managing of our global commons. We know that the Global Pact of the Environment has been in the making for more than 30 years now. So we are now finally in a negotiation moment, and we have a mandate from the UN General Assembly since 2018. So we have to act, we have to do it, we have to have the right strategy to do it. And I really commend the Common Home of Humanity because it has set up a roadmap to make it happen. And what is that we need to have happen is a declaration of principles to redefine, rethink, and transform the relationship, as I mentioned already, between society, the economy, politics, and nature. It is intended to be an umbrella scaffold for the already existing multilateral environmental agreements, more than 240 as we know. So the main objective of the Pact, and that's why there is so much traction among civil society and several member states as well, it's bolstering the environmental law system at all levels, as well as achieving, of course, helping to deliver on the sustainable development goals. And I really like the first text for discussion and negotiation, assessing something that is common sense, but it's not happening right now. Every person has the human right to live in an ecologically sound environment that is suitable for their health and well-being. And the concept of the principles of no regression, intergenerational equity, it's central to this new design, to this building back better of the exercise that we are doing here and today. So it is going to be extremely useful to have a global pact on the environment in hand. It would be a useful tool for states and societies to integrate their own domestic policies and planning processes. The pact, of course, would help establish coherence and avoid fragmentation, waste of resources in the implementation and delivery of the environmental multilateral agreements. The Pact would help to set norms and standards to improve and develop national legislation. It could provide platforms to protect the rights of specific groups or persons affected by environmental degradation or specific types of pollution. And it would close, of course, the relationship between, as mentioned, 2030 agenda and the sustainable development goals. What is the strategy? What is the way forward? We gather here today to discuss a timeline, but also content and strategy. The proposal of the Common Home of Humanity and its partner is to steer a global dialogue prior to Stockholm+50 during 2021, the Stockholm+49 process, and provide input to the political declaration and the negotiations underway for the Environmental Assembly in 2022. So the goal would be, at the end of the day, to have a new social and political pact that introduces the principle of the integrity and unity of the Earth system, considering that it is a common heritage of humankind and the scaffold, the material scaffold of our well-being as humankind. So the UN Environmental Assembly in Nairobi was tasked, as we know, to produce a political declaration to be transmitted to the 2022 Stockholm Conference 50th anniversary. So there is a lot of homework that we need to do during this year. Let's go back to COVID just to close. I think that COVID-19 has certainly been a litmus test for humanity. We have realized that our behavior can change dramatically and quickly. And it has taught us that we can very quickly decide to consume less, perhaps to produce less, to travel less. So it really is showing that we can have, you know, a societal change quickly and dramatically. And that's exactly what nature needs from us, what the Earth system needs from us. And I think we need to use wisely the momentum of building back better. And the building back better exercise should include multilateral institutions and global governance arrangements. And the key question here, let's put it simply, is how to restore economic activity and build back better without the old patterns of environmental degradation. And that connection is what the negotiation of a global pact of the environment can help address and solve. But of course, perhaps just a piece of warning, we need a reality check for our roadmap and what we're going to do. We have to consider that we live in a very polarized international environment. And that, of course, hinders the need to address the legal and political responsibility to manage our global commons. The number two warning, perhaps, is that we are witnessing an exacerbated nationalist environment. There is a need for a renewed definition of coexistence, as mentioned before, of sovereignty versus global commons, of sovereignty with responsibility. We have some procedural challenges also to consider in the UN decision-making process. As president of the General Assembly, believe me, that has been one of the critical issues. How is that the United Nations is taking decisions? The idea of UN consensus versus unanimity in decision-making. You know, I have ruled many times now that consensus cannot mean unanimity, that we need a broader acceptance, a broader buy-in of critical decisions. We cannot have one or two countries just spoiled a world response to a critical problem, which is the destruction of our natural environment. So I think that a decision-making at the UN should also be rethought under a democratic lens and to rethink the veto power of a minority. So we need to learn how to accommodate dissent, and for that we need a conversation with member states. So I think that in terms of concrete strategy, the Common Home of Humanity has done an incredible job, coalition of the willing, but this coalition of the willing has to include member states together with civil society, academia, and the private sector. We need to continue doing something that it's on the making and very important effort to create a shared narrative and include the Global Pact on the Environment in the efforts to build back better and the current ongoing discussion regarding the new governance arrangements. And I think it's very important that the Common Home of Humanity and partners have a voice in the current think tanks, independent commissions, such as the Compass Commission, the Lancet Commission, the independent WHO Commission on Rethinking Global Governance. I just to close here, because I think my time is over, but you know, we are at a crossroads, and this is the moment in which we have to decide the path we wish to take. The countdown has begun. We need to take actions. The need to, you know, we need to reach, you know, agreement, because we are, reaching a point of what I call of no return, for example, in global warming or the extinction crisis. We already know what are the results of inaction, which strikes the hardest, the most vulnerable. And we know, for example, what climate change is doing to small island developing states, to sub-Saharan Africa, and to the United States, for that matter. There is only one response, and it is a multilateral response to address and manage our common heritage, to manage our Earth system. Multilateralism and cooperation are our best tools. And I am a stubborn optimist, as late Kofi Annan used to say. I know that we can look at the future with hope and not with despair, with responsibility and not with indifference. And we are here today. We gather here today. I'm proud to be an ambassador of the common home of humanity, because we are not indifferent. And we know that we can make a difference. We can have an impact. We can have a footprint in a situation of crisis that is going to give us the opportunity of building back better, a transformed relationship between society, economy, politics, and nature. And it has a name. That rearranging of this relationship has a name, and the name is the Global Pact for the Environment. And I thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Maria. Thank you for putting everything in context and basically saying we have no excuse not to do what we need to do. We know how to do it. We can do it. What are we waiting for? Let's get going. Thank you so much. We turn now to the person who started this innovative initiative, Paula Mccalhays, founder and director of the Common Home of Humanity. Paula holds a degree in law by the Catholic University of Porto, post-degree in environmental law by the University of Coimbra, and PhD in human ecology from the New University of Lisbon. He is co-editor of the Safe Operating Space Treaty, a new approach to managing our use of the Earth system, and a member of the ethics specialist group of the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, World Commission on Environmental Law, and co-founder of the Environmental Law and Governance Association. Paula, you're on.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much to all my colleagues in this webinar, to accept the invitation, and also to the UN 75 team that makes a wonderful job. In our partnership table and in this process of celebrating 75 years of United Nations, we always try to go to the cause roots of the problem. And we think that the core problem of climate is that climate has never been recognized as a global common. And this question has many cascading effects in society, in economy, in international relations, everywhere. Let's go to the beginning of the question. When climate change entered for the first time on the UN agenda, the first question raised was, what is climate from a legal point of view? As you can imagine, climate is not a territory. Climate, it's not a global common like the others that are the leftovers of the divisions of states. Climate is a system, is intangible, is a pattern, a determinate pattern of function of that system. We cannot divide it. It circulates around the planet and is different from everything that international law ever saw. So the question was how international law that is mainly based on a territorial approach to the planet can look at this new reality. And the first answer, or the first tentative answer, was proposed by Malta, and they proposed to recognize climate, a stable climate, as a common heritage of mankind. Of course, because climate exists inside and outside of the sovereignties, this was not accepted. But they tried to find some answer to this question. And the answer was, let's consider that climate is not a heritage, but instead is a concern of humankind. The question is, what is a concern from a legal point of view? Concern is a concern. We use usually in the international law to use concerns to take care about issues. So, but the question is that in this case, we are dealing with something that exists on the nature, that exists on the real world. Climate is not an issue. Climate is a system that, although intangible, exists on the natural world and is exhaustible by the use. So, after this, the option of consider climate as a concern results, the outcome is a system in which each country try to minimize the damage on the climate, try to reduce emissions. But the great question is that in the end of the day, this is a negative sum game. The total resource, the total amount of stable climate will always decrease. Why? Because by considering climate as a concern, you do not recognize the existence of a global common inside and outside of the sovereignties. We do not accept yet that this planet is not only a territory divided between states. What makes this planet different from all the planets that we know is the existence of a system that supports life. And this system does not exist for the law. Because it does not exist for the law. Is the work of nature also, for example, the work of Amazon forest, is invisible for economy also. Okay? Try to understand all the consequences that we have for not accepting that we have a global common without borders that is intangible and we cannot divide it. Okay? Because we do not recognize a global common that is intangible, global, indivisible, like the Earth system, that makes the difference between this planet and all the other planets. All the ecosystems that maintain and produce this function, this pattern of stability of a stable climate. The work that is made there that benefits all the humanity all over the planet does not exist for the law, and for so does not exist also, is invisible for economy. This means that the countries that have in their territory, for example, the Amazon rainforest, the only way to put this forest, the value of this forest, on the GDP is to destroy the forest. Because we do not see the intangible work of the forests. And the way how we see the intangible will determine how we manage the tangible. And for so, we are destroying the support of life. This, if we recognize that we have a global common without borders, this will change the concept of value. What has more value? The work of the forest that is made on that system that support life and support humanity, or the value of the timber, or the value of the soil. How it's possible that we still being destroying forests to plant soil? How it's possible? How we can go to the moon and we cannot preserve the forests? Because a concept, because we are unable to accept that we have a global common without borders, is intangible and is the system that supports life. So we are proposing to recognize that system as a common heritage, intangible common heritage of mankind. We have all, when Malta proposed this, we have the scientific tools to define the common. Now we have defined the safe operating space for humankind. We have the concept, the scientific concept of the planet boundaries. We have already built the concept, the legal concept of the common heritage of mankind. And yet, we have recognized natural intangible goods out of space law. And the question still if we have all the conditions, all the tools that are necessary to accept that this planet is not only a territory, why do not accept a global common without borders? The only barrier that we have is in our heads, because we think that sovereignty is a territory, and sovereignty is not a territory. We can exercise sovereignty under a territory, but we cannot exercise sovereignty on the system. All the sovereignties depend on the well-functioned Earth system. We have overlap of two different legal regimes in the same place. We should have. All the territories are part of the system, and the system is different from the territory. So what we propose is to recognize that system as a common international mechanism, and based on this, to build a system of accountability of what is every state made positive on the Earth system and what is made negative on the Earth system. And this is the most basic rule to be possible to manage a global common. If we start to manage the Earth system and the stable climate as a common, we have economic science have already defined what are the structural conditions that are needed to manage a common. We have the economic knowledge also to manage commons. What is missing is only to accept that we have a common without borders. For so, we think besides all the instruments we have already, from scientific, economic, and legal frameworks to do this, what is missing in this moment only is a political process. And this political process has already started. We participated in all the meetings in Nairobi last year during the Global Pact discussions. And what was discussed there was also, some kind of a mess, because nobody knows what a Global Pact should be. The great question of a Global Pact is, what is the object of a Global Pact? What are we discussing here? Climate, biodiversity, plastics, oceans, whatever, we don't know. Because we have no definition what is global. And what is global is the system, it's a systemic approach. So during this process, we try harder to produce documents to introduce the discussion of this holistic approach, the systemic approach to the Global Pact. The process doesn't die in Nairobi. It's open again. We have already the first meeting of the second phase, and we will have a first draft on the next UNEA 5 that will take place in Nairobi. Let's see if it is in Nairobi next February 2021, having as milestone the Stockholm+50 in 2022. And this is probably the last chance we have to address the planet in a different way. Is the last chance we have to make a paradigm shift. What is foreseen for Stockholm+50 is a high-level declaration that no one knows in this moment what we'll say. This declaration can be will not be the solution, will not be the pact, but can be the opportunity to open the door for a new approach to this problem. Stockholm+50 can be our last hope. For so, we will look for partners to organize Stockholm+49. We want that countries, that the delegates, when go to the rooms for negotiations in Stockholm, in UNEA 5, they go there knowing that civil society is watching, civil society makes pressure, and we must find a solution for humanity and open the door in Stockholm+49. Join us, let's make the difference. We have all the tools to change the pathway. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Paulo. And folks, I think you can see from whence this initiative came out of the a cauldron of international law and deep commitment and passion for all species, for the planet, for the survival of all of us. Paula, your moments of inspiration years ago when this concept came to light for you was the earth speaking through you, right? And we bless you for sticking with that and bringing it to us. We will do everything we can to use your inspiration, your insights to help us save the species. And now as we return to Magnus Jidward, research consultant with the Global Challenges Foundation, who will speak to us about his view on issues such as not accepting a least common denominator pact, when we come to that. Magnus was with Global Challenges Foundation when the foundation awarded the Common Home of Humanity 2018 a New Shape Prize, which provided the first seed funding to begin to develop this initiative further. It was a critical moment, crucial, and that's what the Global Challenges Foundation does. They bring new concepts to light, they give seed funding to them, and they help shepherd them along the way. We're deeply indebted to that, Magnus. And Magnus has a doctorate in philosophy from Sweden's Lund University. He teaches ethics at the Master of Science program in management at the School of Economics and Sustainable Development. He's also chairman of the Swedish Peace and Arbitration Society. Get this, the world's oldest and Sweden's largest peace organization. Magnus, thank you so much for everything you do. And please bring your thoughts and insights to us now that we heard from our first two great presenters. Magnus, the floor is yours.
Same problem every time. Thank you very much for inviting me here. I'm very happy and honored to be part of this great panel. First of all, to be in the company of the brilliant people that have been convened for this panel, but also that I really admire your work, the work that you are doing in the Common Home of Humanity. And I'm really impressed with how this idea and this movement has developed in the years that have passed since it participated in the New Shape Prize competition, as you mentioned, Earl. And I have had the privilege to be able to follow that ever since that competition. So that is really something that I enjoy. And also, I'm very happy and honored to be here because I truly believe that the topic of this panel discussion is of utmost importance for the future of this amazing planet that we inhabit together. And I'm really proud if I could contribute in some minimal way to furthering the ideas that you have developed here. Just one, thank you for the introduction also, Earl. I must also only correct one thing. I'm no longer chairman of the Swedish Peace and Arbitration Society. I used to be that, but it was some years ago. But today I'm working with the Global Challenges Foundation, as was said, and I'm also doing some research at Lund University on climate policy issues. So let me first begin to say that I'm fully on board with the basic ideas that the Common Home of Humanity and Paula Mccalhays have developed, that we need legal recognition and protection for the global commons. By the way, I love this term, the global commons. We should use that more often because, as I think Paula is really right, that the problem is in our minds, and by using terms as the global commons when we talk, we kind of may change a little bit the way that we think about things. So I'm completely on board with the basic idea that we need legal recognition and protection for this complex and delicate life supporting systems on which all life on this planet depends. And yeah, it's really crazy that such a system does not already exist. It's crazy that it can even be considered an inviolable right of every sovereign state to decide by itself if it wants to cut off the branch that we're all sitting on. So yeah, and I agree totally also with what Maria Fernanda Espinosa said, that this shows that there is a real need to redefine sovereignty, for example. We need to think about national sovereignty in a different way. Just to make for example, if we think about how we don't think about individual freedoms and private property being infringed, for example, by, if I own some property, I'm not allowed to poison the creek that runs through my property. I'm not allowed to use my car in any way I want. It doesn't infringe my liberty and my property rights that I have to follow the traffic rules, for example. That is how we can even use that. So that we think about these global commons in a way that it's up to each country to decide if it wants to poison the creek that runs over its territory. That's really a crazy way that we need to change. So in the Global Challenges Foundation, I'm working with a project that is in many ways aligned with the work that you are doing in the Common Home of Humanity. That we are convening a group of policy experts from around the world to form what we call a climate governance commission. And the aim of this commission is to fill a crucial gap in the way that we are dealing with climate emergency by focusing not on the climate science as such, and not on the technological solutions or the business solutions, but rather on the global governance structure, how international institutions and how the modes of collective decision-making on a global level could be improved to support the exponential climate action that we really need. And the international legal system, the lack of legal protection for this global common, the world's climate system, that is obviously like a key part of that work. And the goal of implementing a comprehensive Earth system law, as you have suggested, is very much in line and at the heart of how we also think about these issues. We see several reasons to focus on climate change if the goal is to reform global governance system at large. One is, of course, the urgency of the threat. If we don't solve the climate crisis, there will be few other problems left for us to solve in the future. So the urgency of the threat, we really must tackle this very, very quickly. The other reason is the sense of emergency that is growing around this issue. And the sense of emergency, I think, is very important because it creates some kind of acceptance for change. There is a growing awareness that this is a problem that we have to tackle and that we have to accept some changes in our lifestyles and ways that we manage our businesses in order to solve it. Third, there is also growing movement around the climate change issue, and I think that is really essential in order to achieve any policy, important policy changes, that you have the support of a grassroots movement, and that there's also a movement among businesses today. There's an awareness that businesses need to change to transition to a new type of economy in order to solve this problem. So there is support from the business community and from people in general. And that is also, the existence of that support is a reason to focus on climate change to deal with global governance changes in general. And the fourth, which I think is important, is the complexity of this issue. But you cannot deal with climate change in isolation. This issue has bearing on all policy fields. trade, finance, equality, development policy, conflict and security, migration, biodiversity. It affects everything, and we need to put the climate change issue at the heart of all the policy processes that deal with these issues. And that means that complexity is really also a kind of friend here. This crisis, if we manage to pull ourselves together and do what we know needs to be done to solve this crisis, then we will be better equipped to deal with any other global crisis in the future. So one of the ideas that we have been working on and discussing in the Climate Governance Commission, and that was also discussed at the innovation track of this UN 75 Global Governance Forum, that I think might be of relevance for this discussion as well, that addresses the question, how do we get from here to there? That's the idea of climate clubs. It's an idea that was presented by William Nordhaus a number of years ago, and it addresses the problem that arises from how do you get to an international agreement that is both sharp enough to solve the issue and also have global coverage. And it seems to me that the experience from many international negotiations and the multi-year climate negotiations that have been going on is that there seems to be an inevitable trade-off here, that first the climate negotiations led to no result, and then it led to Paris Agreement, which was actually based on that each country could define its own target. So it puts those agreements are really important. Climate clubs are not an alternative to the Paris Agreement, but rather a complementary design to that. That allows a group of countries to move ahead, a group of countries that have more ambitious goals. And I think that Nordhaus formulated this in order to as a way of implementing a price on carbon, that countries could agree to impose a price on carbon and then tax at the border non-members, import from non-members. But I think that it could be used as a way of dealing with other problems as well, like having countries could form a pact for the environment, agreeing to implement a sharp Earth system law, and then and try to go ahead because and not accept a watered down global coverage agreement, but rather we need to have those global agreements as well as like a floor, but we also need to make room for countries to move ahead. Do I have time to give one example of a process that took that route, Earl? Okay, great. Because at the climate at the session about climate governance the other day at the UN 75 Global Governance Forum, we had the privilege to have Dr. Lloyd Axworthy, former foreign minister from Canada, with us. And he was a key person in a process that was very successful and that led to an agreement that I think is very important for global governance. And that was the Landmine Ban. And there we had an international negotiation going on, some countries wanting to implement a global prohibition on the use and production and trade of landmines. But there were also a number of countries that were not so keen on that idea. And the negotiations got stuck, of course. And the risk was that you would end up with a very watered down, like, this is not so good, but it's up to every country to decide if they want it or not. But Canada and Austria together decided that, no, we don't want that. So let's take another route. Let's take a short track and go with the countries that have an interest in this prohibition. And they formulated a draft that really was a sharp legally binding prohibition against all use, transport, trade, and production of anti-personnel mines. And that was signed by 122 countries 1 year later in Ottawa. And then they put it back into the UN system. And now it's a convention that has been signed by 160 countries. So I think that Paula might be right, that this is the last chance. But my point here is that, yes, we should definitely go for a global pact for the environment, but we should also be prepared to be creative enough to find another route when some countries put their heels in the ground and don't want to follow. So that's the point that I would like to contribute to this discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Magnus. That was a great, inspiring overview. Again, pulling together so many great ideas and opportunities and initiatives underway that are complementary, that need to be brought together by someone who can synthesize all of these opportunities and challenges and show how they work together. The climate clubs, the Global Green Growth Initiative, the Climate Governance Commission, the Common Home of Humanity. We have the answers, we have the pathways, we have political will building, and we are ready to now ask our fourth panelist to bring that together to respond to what has been put on the table and lay out our pathway. What are our best next steps? Where do we go from here? Our panelist is Dr. Isabella Teixeira, co-chair of the International Resource Panel of the UN Environment Program. It's a science and policy platform for building and sharing knowledge needed to improve our use of natural resources. Dr. Teixeira holds a Master's of Science in Biological Science from the University of Brasilia, a PhD in Energy Planning from Federal University of Rio de Janeiro. She was Brazil's Minister of the Environment 2010 to 2016, where she led Brazil's negotiations of the Paris Agreement on climate change. In 2013, she was named a champion of the earth. She is the person to now bring together what we have talked about today, what we have heard, and give us our marching orders. Dr. Teixeira, the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you very much. I think that's it's a challenge as to manage the commons, okay, to bring everybody together, but my feeling is what we need to do. I'm very honored to join my friends and also to be part of this initiative. And I'd like to highlight here some points that previously were addressed by friends. I think that Earl gives us some important point when he says that we need coherence, solutions, coherence in solutions and agreements. This is something that when we go into the society to dialogue, we really question how we cannot move based on coherence. Indeed, we have the acts there, you have the decision, how we cannot move faster, how we cannot be engaged and to put the things together, okay? Because we have fragmented visions sometimes, political ones, and difficult to put things together. So the first one I'd like to highlight here, we are looking for coherence. We're looking for how we can bring common interests, convergence of interests together. This is a clear message that civil society brings to us every time, every day, saying how we can address crisis. And it's not only climate change, as my friends mentioned before. Second, I'd like, of course, Maria Espinosa highlights not only key points, but she gave to us the building blocks of a roadmap. Indeed, because you have the political message, she has a clear understanding of the global challenges, but I think that to have some points here is very important when you're looking forward to discuss or to bring people together, considering the global comments. The first one is that we need to rethink the global governance. And this is very important because what we have today is not enough to move faster or even to move with more ambitions as the civil society requires. If you go into the stakeholders, multi-stakeholders around the world, consider the agreements that we have with the climate change, they said, we need to do more. And sometimes the society, every time society wants to do more, can give solutions to do more, but the governments, they want to slow the solutions. And this is you have this asymmetry today, consider what the society understands that you need to do, and sometimes how this is translated into political actions, indeed how multilateral systems host solutions. So this is something very important to pay attention, and it's very important to understand that what we're looking for here is a new relationship, or to understand how we can move on, consider humankind, nature, and economy. And also, of course, to address what UN system today is highlighted as a big crisis, though the top crisis considered gender inequality, social inequality, and of course, climate change. So what we're saying politically, that to know how to bring things together, we understand the connectivities among different issues and different agendas, but we need a new political push. We need something that makes sense for us, based on this century, not based on the past. And this is a political message that I'd like to share here. We need to be provocative. We need to consider new concepts that are emerging, consider the new century, okay? And we need to go to fight or to bring innovative ways to discuss the old concepts like populism, like sovereignty based on the past and not sovereign based on what we have today. So if you go into the past and you can check what the Stockholm Declaration in 1972, one of its principles, the 21, I think, so shows all the concepts about sovereignty, okay? So when you have some arguments against global environmental protection or global environmental issues from some countries that argument based on sovereignty, come on, you have this decision that was taken 50 years ago, or almost 50 years ago. Okay, so this is a clear example how people want to bring some cloud or fog to postpone debates that we should promote, and it should find solutions and move fast. So I think that it's very important when we have our friends saying that we have this opportunity to have a new roadmap, or as Paulo highlighted, that you don't have another planet. We have this planet. We need to understand better how to connect things and how to bring things. We need to recognize today that we have a diversity of political situation around the world, and we had a big challenge to rebuild, to reshape, and to strengthen multilateral systems as a common process to share not only responsibilities, but to share solutions. We need to do this at the national levels, but the global co-benefits from our actions need a global system, a powerful, strong multilateral system that will bring us in the clearest transparency what are the goals that we need to achieve and what are the common challenges for international cooperation. We need to move forward, in my opinion, and I think that this opportunity to discuss or to bring a new global environmental pact under discussion, under the lights in such a way that we can say, come on, you have solutions, fragmented one, and you need to avoid also the setbacks of multilateral environmental agreements that you have today. My feeling is that you have different players into the room, this is good, but I'm not sure if you have erosion through these new agreements that have in other economic areas that indeed looking forward to address environmental issues that we have solutions adopted in the past. We need to pay attention what's happening today. It's not only what we want to do, but how this driving force, they put pressure in short-term perspective exactly to influence in a positive or negative way our way to move. My feeling is also when Paulo mentioned Amazonia, and I like this too much because we need to know more about realities. And Amazonia as commons, it's a wicked problem. Okay, you have conflicting narrative, contradictory arguments. We have different realities. Nobody understands indeed what it means. But the outcomes or the results that you have show to us that we need to go into there and to manage this better than we are doing today. So I think that we have really an important task here to discuss the commons, consider our challenge in this century and not consider the challenge in the past. This is something very important politically, and probably Maria will agree with me, because we need indeed to find a way to bring civil society, the different players that really, as I mentioned before from my friends, that business sector, science, everybody's coming to address solution. And after COVID crisis, we need to organize this better. We need to understand better how we address this global mobilization to understand the urgency of the present, not the urgency of the future. What you have today is people post-pandemic or consider COVID crisis. We are understanding that we need to change. Nobody, and you have, of course, the contractor, some driving force that try to put our in the past, not in the future, but we need to put this apart and move forward, consider the new ones. This is the new century, okay? And I'm fully convinced that probably the beginning of this 21st century will happen after the COVID crisis. Not 20 years ago, okay, when you have September 11. It's indeed with the post-COVID crisis, the new momentum, as Magnus showed to us, that the world is saying that we need to change. Okay, and even if and I like too much when he mentioned that we have Paris Agreement on one side of the coin, but we have also the Climate Club, and we are looking for complementary arrangements to move forward. And also how we can be creative with new routes, how we can be really be innovative to bring people together, and not only the government, and have a good piece of legal arrangements that you can go back to UN system, and indeed it's approved as additional measures that will facilitate and will be faster the solution that must be addressed. We are not discussing only solution, we are discussing the way to implement solutions. And this is something that political, it's very important to be understand in such a way that we can indeed bring the right players in the right time, in the right games, in the right tracks. And in my feeling is that we need, in this perspective, to understand better how to debate commons today, considering shared responsibility and also share obligations, and and also share human rights. This is something this is very sensitive. Probably Paulo knows this better than everybody here. How we can bring environmental quality or environmental issue as human rights, indeed. And this can be translated at national, this is a common understanding, but not necessarily the legal and national legal framework. This is will recognize as a right, okay? And this is very important when we're provoking these new debates, how indeed we can bring people together. My feeling, because I don't have much time, and is that we need to avoid the war against the past. This is something that happened. I'm saying this because this is what is happening today in my country, in Brazil. You have some people that want to go against the past, not to go to build up solutions to the future. And what we're discussing here is not to go against the past. You have difficulties in the past, you have misunderstanding, but we have solutions. We need to discuss the commons based on today and on the future, our challenge. You have new concepts, you have impact of the new economies, you have the new geopolitical arrangements and disputes that you have around the world. You have a polarized dispute, you have a multi-regional and multipolar, probably geoeconomic or geopolitical world. We need to understand what is coming. We need to discuss this, consider the perspectives of the future, and not based on the past. As I used to say, we need to tell new stories based on the future. We need to tell new stories, indeed, based on with the new generation that are coming, how they are very interested to be mobilized, and what is the contribution individual and collectively, and that we can do, and you need to do, not that we need to do. Here in Brazil, we are discussing, as you mentioned, Amazon region. It's not only in Brazil. We have the basin, the watershed, and how can bring, and also Maria knows a lot about this because it's part of this. If you go into the past, you can check this. Really, it's so amazing how Amazon is so was so important even for Americas or the South America new discovery in the 17th. It's fascinating how the history tells us about this. But look, what I'm saying is that we need to find solutions, and we are discussing this today in private sector, in the civil society, how we can promote development based on conservation. Is how we can access natural resource and environmental ecosystems and environmental service and use this to propose development. Technologies and other traditional knowledge, the diversity of indigenous people, etc., etc. We need to use this as assets. We don't need to destroy this. That's why I think that Paula mentioned that the GDP to assume that we have these economic values, consider the Amazon region, we need to destroy the forest. We don't need to destroy forests. We need to reshape the way to propose development, and based on conservation, understand how we can, not only pricing, but how we can add value for this process. And this means society participation. It's impressive. You need new business models. Impressive how we're mobilizing today in Brazil, consider civil society. We have the private banks initiative in my country addressing solutions for private banks. The financing system in Brazil is doing a new initiative exactly to face the challenge on Amazon. So the crisis provoked us to move forward. This is my point. And I think that this opportunity to use the idea that to come from the common house humanity, and indeed how we can bring human rights and the environment and economic development, the new geopolitical agreements, consider the new Green Deals, etc., etc., and how we can bring society under the leadership is our big challenge. I'm very enthusiastic. I'm so enthusiastic of this idea, and modern idea of this political challenge. This is our political challenge. This is impressive how we can bring people together. You have in there 5 steps to be fulfilled. This is very important. But look, we cannot forget that if you want to move forward, if you want a new international cooperation, if you want new economies, if you want to refer to global governance, if you want to tackle climate change and biodiversity laws, everything that you mentioned, also women rights, we need to be on board. Nobody will change this. We will change. And this is how the government reacts, okay? If the society is not able to act, to propose, to put pressure, and to share a new understanding about the challenge that you have in this world, probably you have the traditional players that will slow the pace and try to postpone the solutions, because this is the reality that you need to go against. The world is changing, okay? The society is changing. The way that we live here is changing, but the nature, we have something here in Brazil that I like to say, God can forgive you, okay? The man can forgive you, the nature never forgive you. So you have to remember this, and COVID, it's a really a good example that we cannot postpone our engagement, our responsibility, our obligation, and more than this, if you want to address our rights. So it's something that I'm full, how can I say, so happy to be part of this, but more than this, it's a big challenge. I think if Maria will agree with me, that probably this is the biggest challenge that we have considered our career, because it's based on what will come, not based on what we have. So thank you very much, and I hope that we can mobilize people, and come on, let's do together. Let's bring people together with our diversity. Our diversity is exactly our asset. It's exactly what's the political, the global, the diversity of society, the cultural diversity, exactly this. Sometimes it's hard to bring people together, but be sure, if you can listen people, if you can hear the diversity of situations, you can understand this, you can have a transformative process. And discuss global commons now in this new moment of the world, it's a transformative process, a transformative challenge. Let's be together, and I'm sure that will well succeed when you have Stockholm+50, and you have a really powerful, innovative way, not only to see the problems, but to bring the solutions into this global governance system. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Teixeira. Very inspiring and challenging. Again, reassurance that we can do it. We know what to do. Now we need to do the strategy. So we have about 10 minutes before the wrap up of this session. And since we all know all the answers, maybe that's all the time we need, right? So what I'd like to do is do a round table, go back in the order of our panelists. And the question to address now is, how can we use the Stockholm+49 event, June 2021, 10 months from now, as the goal to have together a powerful NGO, member state, coalition of the willing, coalition, as Magnus highlighted regarding the Landmine Treaty. How can we have pull all that together in 10 months so that in June of 2022, in Stockholm, in person or virtually or whatever, we have on the table not only these solutions, but also the political will convened. So let me go back to Maria Espinosa. Please, if you will make about 2 minutes of comments on this, we'll go around table and then summarize.
Well, Earl, you're giving me a tough task after, listening to so much wisdom here. But I would just leave some headlines on issues. The number one, when Paula was speaking, I thought about what we put in place when we included in the Ecuadorian constitution the rights for nature. There is a constitutional mandate to put nature not as an object, but as a subject of rights. And I was the foreign minister at the time. I resigned to work with the drafting group of the constitution, really to pass that concept, which was an epistemological break, to consider nature as a subject of rights. And I think that perhaps we can, behind the scenes, share a little bit of the experience, because it's a little bit of this mindset change that we need today to consider a global pact of the environment from a systemic view, from a common heritage view. And of course, now the big problem with the Ecuadorian institution is implementation and its delivery. The existence of a global pact for the environment would be the tool to implement through national legislation the rights of nature. Just so but perhaps we can have an exchange after that, and all the information and material we use to persuade the members of the Constitutional Assembly, to adopt what they adopted at the end. That's the number one. The number two is related to what Magnus was saying. What we are witnessing is an incredible amount of creativity and of proposals. If we look at the Global Governance Forum for UN 75 and their report, there is a huge menu of things to do. The problem is we know what to do, we know even how to do it in terms of the policy responses, but we don't know who is going to do it, and how. So, and the exercise that you're doing with climate governance, I fully agree. I've been part of delegations on climate negotiations for the past 20 years. I was in Paris as head of delegation, and shared so many spaces also with Isabella. And believe me, the golden bullet is about identifying who is going to implement and deliver. What are the institutional arrangements that we need for that? And we need to have in hand and in mind real politics. That's how the world works. And the problem we have to face and solve is the disconnection between nature cycles, the cycles of nature, and the cycles of politics. and the mindsets. I mean, you know, nature requires a systemic long-term commitment. Politics is about short-term gains, is about instrumental rationality. How to bring the two together, what are the gains? And that's where strategy comes to play. No, and that's, you know, we need to discuss a little more about that. But in conversations about governance have to be more concrete, you know, more to the point. And I've been participating all this week in 2-3 events per day, and everybody agrees that building back better requires new governance arrangements and new governance architectures. But we need to start playing with the cards and identifying what is that we need to come up with. And so that there is a lot of homework ahead of us. I really love the idea of Isabella, not to go against the past, but build in the present and the future. You know, basically, when you look at all the data we have, we know that there are 3 defining challenges. One is climate, the number 2 is inequalities, and not in that order, but, and the third is the gender inequality gap in particular, and how to go about that. There are hundreds, thousands of responses and options, but who is going to do it? When people say, well, the UN has to do it. Well, fine, we are the UN too. You know, the UN is a shared responsibility. We are global citizens and we have a responsibility. We have a role to play. And so we need to come to the details of strategy. Stockholm +49 is going to be a great opportunity, you know, to plant the seeds, to create the momentum for Stockholm 50 and for UNEA 2022. So there is a lot of homework, a lot of incredible ideas, and we have a responsibility. And we are here because we are committed. We are committed, and thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you very much. I want to quickly jump now back to Magnus to follow Dr. Espinosa's comments here, and in relation to Stockholm +49, bringing together Climate Governance Commission, the climate clubs, all the solutions, the grassroots organizing that we can do between now and then to bring the energy and passion and urgency of the grassroots, the younger generations, the ones who are inheriting this globe from us, right? Bring that together at Stockholm 49 event. How do you see that being the let's call it the opportunity related to our last chance to get it right?
Well, I think that Stockholm +50 is an important milestone to aim for, and I think that those milestones can play a very important role. I think that this UN 75 moment have played an important role in bringing together civil society organizations and other stakeholders together to think about these problems and to come up with a roadmap that is presented at this UN 75 Global Governance Forum. So the 75th anniversary of the UN created some kind of catalyzed a lot of action and a lot of new contacts and a lot of contacts between the UN institutions and civil society that has resulted in a lot of new ideas. I think that there are now also a very important milestone next year that should have been happening this year in November, but the COP26 that will take place in Glasgow in November next year, there will be a lot of expectations and momentum built up to that, and that might be one of, paraphrasing Paula, that might be also one of the last chances we have to actually move forward with climate action in the pace that we need in order to avoid exceeding the Paris targets of 2 degrees or 1.5 degrees. And I think that the Stockholm+50 is also one of those important moments, which is kind of number magic. It's 50 years since another meeting, but it makes, just like the UN 75th anniversary, it creates some kind of reason to come together and think together and create. So I think that we should definitely take that opportunity. And now we have a roadmap from this meeting, and we have a lot of material that the UN have gathered during the dialogue process with millions of people around the world to build on. So I think that we are kind of more on track, I think, where we are now. And let's use these milestones I don't think that it will be the last chance, actually. I don't think that we will get all the way to the goal, but we can only aim for that. And then there will be a new milestone. So we will take one step ahead, each of these milestones, and move a little bit further. And there I also agree with what Maria Espinosa said just now, that we need to be very concrete and take implementable steps, but we can think of those steps as steps towards something bigger. We can take small steps to solve concrete problems with regard to climate change here and now that are also help us, that make us a little bit better equipped to take the next step and the next step, and eventually we will have created something that works better for all of us.
Thank you, Magnus. I'd like to now ask Dr. Teixeira to respond and talk briefly about Stockholm 49 as an organizing target, again, along the lines of the coalition between member states and NGOs and business to have the solutions and the political will on the table in 10 months from now.
Oh, I think that, first of all, I agree with my friends, but I'd like to highlight 2 points here. As was highlighted before, you have some milestones, and Stockholm plus 49 must be something really innovative in such a way that we can show that the debates consider the other milestones, they are moving off. It's something, because you have defragmented, you have climate change, you have UNEA 5, you have also COP on biodiversity, don't forget this, okay? And also you have the land restore the gate being implemented, and you have FAO food summit, you have different really milestones around the world where everybody will be discussing sustainability, everybody will be discussing how climate change, etc., etc. What we need to show is how we can bring these things together and have a new open political room with an innovative way to bring different players and different ideas, and also different institutions that will be in charge or responsible in the future. I agree that we need we have actions, we have some menus, etc., but don't necessarily have this translated in the full understanding at the national level. And we have some difficulty sometimes, even to address better who are the guys, who are the institutions in charge to do this. My feeling is that you don't have, in the future, you don't have one institution or 2, okay? You have a combination of different players, of different institutions, with different tasks that indeed will come. And what we have, probably what we have next year, when you bring people together, is a good sample of these new demands, of new way that will be in the future. Because you have different things happen, different players, and you need to coordinate this in an innovative way. And that's why I mentioned before that you need to reshape the international cooperation, because we need to understand not only the top and down, but bottom-up approach, but we need to understand how the new flows of interest will come and bring people together. And for example, when you come to food security and food safety and food sustainability, okay, you go into supply chains, you have a different challenge around the world. And if you go into global climate governance, we don't have to address or don't need to address carbon emissions only based on deforestation and land use. We need to understand the responsibility of food production system and how emerging economy comes, because we have the global south with a good and a strategic role consider the future based on food security, for example. It's not one based on developed countries, okay, or only based in developed countries. So when we have the dispute between the United States and China, for example, we indeed probably we cut some tracks or some innovative way that we're dealing before when they have climate agreement in Paris, because we have this political arrangement. So my feeling is that the next year, if you have a strategy, if you can discuss as Maria proposed, and if you understand how to connect these initiatives that did happen, okay, and how you can value what is happening today, to say, come on, we need that to join us because of this, or this. You need to give role for these people, for these movements, okay? It's not, if not, you cannot bring things together. You need to and bring people together. So for me, the next year, for our challenges, not only to convince people to join, people will join, okay? Because people want this. What you need to know, it's what to be the agenda, and how you can bring the players indeed, and how we connect people. And so this is an innovative way to discuss commons. And this is our seed, okay? This is our carrot, how we can provoke people, be creative, to say, what do you discuss in climate governance? Makes sense that you join us to discuss commons. What do you discuss about women's rights and the setbacks? Makes sense to come to sit with us and to understand better this new approach or this innovative way to deal with human rights. Well, if you want to discuss social inequalities, come together with us, because you have responsibility on this debate. We need to show, to open the gates, open the new rooms, to show people that they are part of this. They are not a part of this. And this is our big challenge, because all the international arrangements that we have there, you have our tribes discussing, okay? I'm a member of different tribes. Okay, but what we discuss here is a common tribes. So the way that you can bring people together is say, we need you, but you have the responsibility on this. And this is something that we need to work hard if we want to have a really good performance in Stockholm+49. But I agree that we're starting again, and we need to understand what do we want in Stockholm+50 and beyond of this. We need to understand always beyond. We need to discuss beyond. If not, we probably close to, we are, how can I say, blocked to short-term perspective. And as Maria's highlighted, as politics loves to manage short perspectives. And we need to show a new politics to how can manage short-term perspective, but with a strategic long-term perspectives. And this is our role. This is what civil society wants. It's not only short-term perspective. We need to conciliate this, and this is our challenge, our mission. This is, nobody writes about this. We need to be creative, provocative, and also I need to seduce people to convince them that they are the solution. They are not the problems.
Thank you so much. Very inspiring, very energizing. You know, it pulls me out of any depression I had, but hearing about, you know, all the ecological threat risk yesterday, which was kind of mind-boggling. We can do it. That's the message. We will do it. That's the message. We will aim for Stockholm+49 event will be about the Common Home of Humanity Initiative, plus bringing together with our two great global ambassadors for the Common Home of Humanity, Maria Espinosa and Isabella Teixeira, leading the way with the creative projects and supported organizations like the Global Challenges Foundation and people like Magnus Jaiborn and many, many others. This is what we must pull together in the next 10 months, and we can do it. Paula, we're over time, but you have a microphone now for a very brief thank you and summing up.
Let me only make two statements. First, to answer to Magnus saying COP26 is a substitution of Stockholm+50. The great difference between an Earth system approach and the approach of UNFCCC is that UNFCCC only works with CO2. An Earth system approach works at least with 9 indicators. It's a big difference between 9 indicators and one indicator. And this is one of the main reasons why the predictions of UNFCCCs were almost always wrong. The reality surpassed the predictions of UNFCCC because it's missing this holistic approach. And this holistic approach is on the core of the Global Pact. Everyone knows to talk about climate and CO2, no one's talk about the Global Pact. And the Global Pact, because is openness, could be the place for this, and Stockholm+50 could be the place. If we organize before COP26, maybe we can introduce this question to address in a holistic way all the process, and the Global Pact should be more than the environment, should be also social, because it has implications on economy. And secondly, I want to say to Maria Espinosa, the process that was made on Pachamama countries that recognize the rights to nature, here what we are proposing is not give rights to the system. It's to recognize from a human perspective the existence of something that we do not recognize now. It's the object of law that belongs to all humanity, is not in giving rights to nature, is to recognize the existence of a system in some human societies. Okay, there is a little difference between these, and later we can talk more about this. Okay, thank you so much. But of course, it was one epistemological change. Of course, it was. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye. Thank you.
Have a good weekend. See you soon.
See you soon. See you soon. Okay.
Bye bye.
Thank you.
Thank you,
And
Maria.
thank you.
Thank Magnus. Thank you. Thank you.
And thank you again to the UN 75 Forum and all of its organizers and supporters. We will be back together very soon. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye. Take care and enjoy.
Yes.